The sentence lasted only seconds, but its impact tore through the palace like a warning bell. Duchess Sophie did not hesitate, soften her voice, or look toward the king for permission. With senior royals gathered around her, she delivered 7 devastating words. "Camilla will never represent our royal family." Charles froze. Camilla's expression collapsed, and everyone in that room understood that Sophie had just crossed a line no royal could quietly uncross. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles had summoned the family to Windsor Castle for a private strategy meeting about future engagements, public representation, and the monarchy's changing leadership structure. Public representation means appearing on behalf of the crown at official ceremonies, charitable events, and international gatherings. The decision mattered, because the person chosen would become the public face of royal continuity during a period of growing pressure. Sophie entered that discussion with unusual authority. She was not a distant relative commenting from the edge. The Duchess had earned trust through decades of quiet service beside Edward, protecting private conversations and accepting difficult duties without demanding attention. Her reputation made the accusation more dangerous. If she had spoken, others would assume she possessed evidence. Charles proposed that Camilla become the monarchy's principal female representative at major Commonwealth and family events. Sophie interrupted before the king could finish. Her words were direct, final, and impossible to mistake. The monarch slowly removed his glasses and placed them beside his papers. He did not challenge her immediately. That silence exposed disbelief, humiliation, and a fear he could not hide. His authority had been questioned inside his own family. Camilla gripped the edge of her chair and waited for Charles to defend her. When he remained silent for several unbearable seconds, the queen consort's shock became visible hurt. Sophie's statement no longer sounded like one woman's hostility. It sounded like a doubt others might secretly share. Edward quietly asked his wife whether she wished to rephrase the remark. Sophie looked directly at Camilla and answered that she had said exactly what she intended. Then the trusted confidant removed a folded card from her handbag. 3 carefully written sentences appeared across it, proving this confrontation was neither impulsive nor emotional. She had arrived prepared to challenge the king. Sophie told Charles her objection was not based upon personal dislike. It concerned a private act committed by Camilla during a memorial gathering, an act that had changed everything. And as Camilla demanded to know what Sophie believed she had done, every face in the room turned toward the one woman who had remained silent for far too long. Sophie had built her royal life upon restraint. She survived embarrassment, scrutiny, and years of standing just outside the monarchy's brightest circle without publicly betraying resentment. That was why her statement felt so dangerous. She was not known for reckless rebellion. She was known for choosing silence until silence became impossible. And now, while Camilla searched the room for support, Sophie's calm expression suggested that this confrontation had been growing inside her for months. Sophie had spent years accepting difficult assignments, supporting Queen Elizabeth, and protecting the institution without demanding greater status. A working royal is a family member who carries out official duties on behalf of the sovereign. The Duchess understood that service often meant absorbing pressure without public praise, which was precisely why Charles could not dismiss her words as ambition or bitterness. Camilla carried a very different history. She had fought for decades to be seen as more than the king's wife, hoping to become a legitimate symbol of the crown itself. Sophie's rejection struck directly at that identity. It suggested that marriage, title, and endurance had still failed to erase the doubts surrounding her place. Edward leaned closer to his wife and warned that the statement could divide the family permanently. The prince wanted to support Sophie, yet he also feared what open conflict with Charles might do to the brothers. She answered quietly that peace built upon silence was not peace at all. Charles reminded Sophie that he had trusted her with sensitive duties. The king expected loyalty in return. She replied that loyalty to him could not require silence when the monarchy itself was being damaged. Her answer transformed the confrontation from a personal insult into a question of duty. Camilla pushed her chair back as though preparing to leave. Charles softly asked her to remain. The queen consort sat again, but the request sounded procedural rather than protective, and that difference wounded her more deeply. Anne watched without interruption. When the monarch asked whether she supported Sophie's accusation, the princess refused to answer until the full reason had been stated. Then Sophie disclosed, through a private documented conversation, that Catherine had spoken with her 2 nights earlier. The Princess of Wales had never requested a confrontation, but their exchange confirmed that concern over representation extended beyond one person. Sophie finally asked why William had been excluded from a meeting about the monarchy's future public face. Charles hesitated. That pause revealed the omission had been deliberate and connected to Camilla's influence. But the real wound had not begun with William's missing chair. It had begun weeks earlier, during a memorial ceremony where one private exchange became the point of no return. The confrontation at Windsor had a beginning, and it was not a rumor, briefing, or newspaper headline. It began inside a private reception after a memorial service honoring Queen Elizabeth II. The family had gathered beneath the weight of memory, careful words, and unresolved grief. Then Camilla made a request to Sophie near the late monarch's personal tribute table. The words were spoken quietly, but what they revealed would eventually make silence impossible. 3 weeks earlier, senior royals had assembled inside St. George's Hall after a closed service marking Elizabeth's lifetime of duty. A memorial reception is a private gathering held after a remembrance ceremony, allowing relatives and invited guests to honor the person away from public speeches. The occasion mattered deeply to Sophie because the late queen had treated her as a trusted daughter figure during some of the family's most difficult years. Camilla approached the Duchess beside a tribute table holding Elizabeth's gloves, handwritten notes, and family photographs. The queen consort said future memorial events should present her, not Catherine or Anne, as the principal female continuation of the monarch's legacy. Sophie asked whether Charles had approved the proposal. Camilla answered that the king would understand the necessity. That sentence changed the meaning of the request. She was not describing an agreed plan. She intended to establish the arrangement before receiving his explicit approval, trusting that Charles would accept it afterward, rather than challenge her publicly. Camilla then said the public had to stop looking backward to Elizabeth and Diana. Sophie's expression changed immediately. The Duchess heard more than frustration with nostalgia. She heard an attempt to reduce the emotional power of 2 women whose lives still shaped William, Catherine, Anne, and the wider family. After Camilla walked away, Sophie noticed that a framed photograph of Elizabeth with Anne and Catherine had been placed face down behind the tribute display. She restored it without speaking, but the gesture fixed the moment in her mind. Lady Louise entered during the final seconds of the exchange. She heard Camilla say that representation belongs to the Queen beside the King. Through a private documented conversation later that evening, Louise repeated the exact words to Edward, confirming that Sophie had not misunderstood. Days later, an official engagement schedule placed Camilla at the center of upcoming remembrance events, while Catherine, Anne, and Sophie were assigned reduced roles. Sophie then requested a private explanation from the Queen consort. When Sophie finally closed the door and faced Camilla without aides, cameras, or witnesses, the disagreement stopped being ceremonial and became brutally personal. There were no advisors in the room, and no carefully prepared palace language to soften what followed. Sophie stood near the fireplace while Camilla remained beside a small writing desk, refusing to offer her a seat. For several moments, neither woman spoke. Then Sophie asked one direct question. Had the memorial schedule been changed to elevate Camilla above Catherine and Anne? The Queen consort did not deny it. She defended it and turned a private concern into open conflict. Sophie had requested 10 private minutes at Clarence House before the Windsor strategy session, because she still hoped the dispute could be contained. Clarence House is the London royal residence traditionally used by senior members of the family. The Duchess believed an honest conversation might prevent public humiliation. Instead, Camilla told her the monarchy could no longer function with several competing female figures. The king's wife, she argued, had to become the unquestioned center of royal representation. "You are confusing the crown with yourself," Sophie said. Camilla stepped closer, and warned that those words could destroy the Duchess's position within the working family. The threat was unmistakable. Royal duties, invitations, and influence could all disappear if Charles accepted his wife's version of the confrontation. Sophie admitted she was afraid. Yet she said she feared the monarchy losing its moral center more than she feared losing status, titles, or access. Her answer exposed the difference between them. One woman saw control as protection. The other believed control without restraint would damage the institution they both claimed to serve. Camilla's composure cracked. She accused Sophie of defending Catherine because the younger woman was more popular and represented a future the public already preferred. The trusted confidant refused the comparison. Service was not a competition, she said, and acceptance could not be forced through altered schedules or carefully placed names. Then Sophie invoked Elizabeth. Through a private conversation remembered and documented in her personal account, the late queen had once warned that no consort should confuse closeness to the sovereign with ownership of the royal family. A consort is the spouse of a reigning monarch, a supporting position rather than an independent source of royal authority. Camilla demanded to know whether that warning existed in writing. She insisted any document belonged in the royal archives, the official collection preserving royal records. Sophie refused to confirm it. The queen consort opened the door and declared the meeting over. Sophie remained still long enough to deliver one final sentence. "Then I will say it where Charles can hear me." Later, she learned Camilla had already pressured the king to approve the plan that evening. Yet the coming battle would not be decided by the loudest voice in the room, because behind Charles's hesitation stood a deeper question: who actually possessed the power to define the monarchy's public face? Camilla believed her marriage placed her at the center of royal representation. Sophie believed representation had to be earned through conduct, trust, and service. Between them stood Charles, a king with the legal authority to settle the argument, but not the emotional freedom to do so without consequences. As the Windsor meeting resumed, private secretaries entered carrying engagement schedules. Yet the most important decision rested not inside those folders, but in the king's trembling hands. Charles held the final authority. As sovereign, the reigning monarch responsible for directing official royal work, he could decide who represented the crown at major public and ceremonial events. Yet power on paper was not enough. Anne, William, Catherine, Edward, and Sophie could not formally overrule him, but their cooperation kept the working monarchy credible. Without them, authority would remain, while unity collapsed. The king studied the revised schedule alone, at the end of the table. His attention stopped when he saw Catherine removed from a remembrance service she had already prepared to attend. The change mattered, because the princess represented the direct future of the crown, and sidelining her could look less like organization and more like a deliberate challenge to the line of succession. Charles turned toward Camilla and quietly asked whether she had requested the alteration. The queen consort did not deny it. She said she had corrected an imbalance that weakened the king's wife in public. Her answer forced him into the choice he had feared: defend his marriage, or admit that his wife had acted without full approval. Edward moved before Sophie could speak. He placed his hand over her folded card and told his brother that the Duchess had not made her accusation lightly. The prince's gesture gave Sophie the support she had feared he might withhold, and showed Charles that this was no isolated act of rebellion. Anne then broke her silence. The princess confirmed that she had also been removed from 2 engagements after questioning Camilla's expanded role. Her statement proved a pattern. This was no personal grievance between 2 women. A private secretary finally admitted that William had submitted a written objection 5 days earlier. The document warned that the revised structure would appear to sideline the direct line of succession, meaning the family members expected to inherit the throne. Charles took a pen and drew a line through the schedule. No changes would be implemented, he ordered, until every senior working royal had been consulted. Camilla did not accept the defeat quietly. She asked whether he intended to let his siblings and son govern through emotional pressure. The schedule had been stopped, but the damage had already escaped the room, and Camilla's first reaction to defeat would make reconciliation even more difficult. By sunset, the palace had divided into quiet camps. No official statement had been released, yet engagements were being reviewed, calls were going unanswered, and staff members sensed that something fundamental had shifted. Sophie remained at Windsor with Edward. Camilla returned to Clarence House without Charles. The king stayed behind, staring at the chair his wife had abandoned. Her departure had lasted only seconds, but it left him facing the truth he had spent years avoiding. Royal aides suspended the disputed schedule and began restoring Catherine, Anne, and Sophie to the engagements from which they had been removed. An engagement schedule is the official plan showing which royal attends each public duty. Reversing it mattered, because the palace was no longer treating the changes as harmless adjustments. It was quietly admitting that the balance of representation had been disturbed. William learned of Sophie's statement while traveling back toward Windsor. The prince changed his plans immediately and requested a private meeting with his father. He understood that the dispute now threatened more than family peace. If public roles could be rearranged through private influence, the future structure of the monarchy could be manipulated without the heir's knowledge. Camilla reached Clarence House carrying the humiliation with her. She removed the ceremonial brooch selected for the next morning's engagement and placed it inside its case. The queen consort told her dresser that she would not attend any event where her position remained open to question. Charles telephoned 3 times. She ignored the first 2 calls and answered the third only long enough to accuse him of allowing Sophie to humiliate her before the family. The king tried to explain that stopping the schedule was not a rejection of his wife, but Camilla heard only hesitation where she had expected defense. Sophie felt no victory. Alone with Edward, she admitted that the silence following her declaration had frightened her. The Duchess wondered whether one sentence had destroyed relationships she had once considered unbreakable. Edward reminded her that refusing to speak would also have carried a cost. Then the secrecy began to crack. A staff member overheard that Camilla had left Windsor abruptly, and journalists soon questioned why her next appearance was under review. Catherine called Sophie privately, thanked her for defending the service of others, and warned that the queen consort might frame the conflict as a personal attack rather than an institutional concern. William arrived after dark, dismissed every aide from the library, and closed the door. Charles knew his son had come for a decision. And when Charles finally looked at his son across that silent room, the crisis stopped being a battle between Sophie and Camilla and became a choice about the future of the crown. For once, there were no secretaries, no constitutional advisors, and no carefully rehearsed language between father and son. Charles looked exhausted. William looked controlled, but anger tightened every word he spoke. The prince did not ask his father to reject Camilla as his wife. He asked him to separate love from authority. That distinction, simple and devastating, forced the king to confront the possibility that protecting one relationship had begun to weaken every other bond around him. Charles and William remained alone inside the Windsor Library, with every aide dismissed and the doors closed. A constitutional advisor is a specialist who helps the sovereign understand how private choices may affect public duty and the crown. None were present. The absence mattered, because this conversation could no longer hide behind procedure. It was a father and son confronting damage created by avoidance. William stated the issue plainly. Camilla deserved dignity as the king's wife, but personal insecurity could not decide who represented the monarchy. The future king then asked the question Charles had been dreading. Did you approve Catherine's removal before it happened? The monarch could not answer yes. That silence confirmed what William feared. The queen consort had acted beyond the authority her husband had knowingly granted. Charles admitted that he had avoided confronting Camilla because he feared reopening decades of rejection, public hostility, and private resentment. He had spent years trying to protect her from feeling unwanted again. William did not dismiss that pain. He named its cost. By shielding his wife from one difficult conversation, the king had transferred the burden to Sophie, Anne, Catherine, and the wider family. Their service had been reduced so Camilla would feel secure, and silence had made the imbalance appear acceptable. Then the prince produced a copy of Sophie's folded card. 3 sentences were written across it. The final line read, "A consort may support the crown, but she cannot become the family itself. A consort is the spouse of the reigning monarch, expected to support the sovereign without absorbing every other royal role. Charles read the words twice. He admitted Sophie's public declaration had been harsh, but the warning beneath it was justified. Something had gone too far. The king called Camilla and told her he would come to Clarence House alone. The representation plan, he said, was permanently withdrawn. Before leaving, Charles told William that his wife would remain beside him, but only if she accepted that the monarchy could not be reorganized around her need for validation. The private decision was made before midnight, but by morning, the words spoken inside Windsor had reached the nation, and the public response would force every royal involved to face what the statement had come to symbolize. At dawn, the private fracture became a national spectacle. Broadcasters interrupted ordinary programming, palace gates filled with cameras. The statement appeared in enormous letters across front pages before Buckingham Palace had issued a single explanation. Yet the public response was not simply cruel or celebratory, it exposed a deeper division over loyalty, legitimacy, memory, and service. Sophie had spoken inside a closed room, but millions now treated her words as a verdict on the monarchy itself. News organizations quickly confirmed that a serious dispute had erupted over Camilla's proposed position as the monarchy's principal female representative. Buckingham Palace responded with restrained language, stating that future engagement responsibilities remained under review and that no individual would replace the collective work of the royal family. A working royal is a family member who performs official duties on behalf of the sovereign. The wording mattered because it quietly rejected the idea that one person could absorb the service, authority, and public identity of everyone around her. One national newspaper captured the crisis with a stark front page showing Sophie leaving Windsor beneath the headline, "The Duchess Who Said No." Edward placed the paper beside his wife at breakfast and asked whether she regretted speaking. The Duchess studied the image in silence before answering that she regretted the pain, but not the principle. Her response revealed that she understood the cost and still believed silence would have been worse. Camilla watched the debate from Clarence House. When a broadcaster described Sophie as the conscience of the working royals, the Queen Consort turned off the television. Public sympathy had shifted toward the woman who challenged her, deepening the humiliation she already felt inside the family. Then the mood outside Windsor changed. A small crowd gathered near the gates, and when Sophie's car passed, applause broke out. The moment was carried live, and quickly became the defining image of the day. Supporters were no longer reacting only to a family argument, they were rewarding what they saw as resistance to concentrated power. Charles responded personally. The king confirmed that representation would remain shared according to duty, experience, and constitutional position, the formal place each person holds within the monarchy, not personal preference. He then sent Sophie a handwritten note, acknowledging that her intervention had forced a necessary correction, even though her words had caused real pain. Before the day ended, Charles summoned Sophie, Camilla, Edward, William, Catherine, and Anne to one final private meeting. The family now had to decide whether the crisis would harden into permanent division or become the discipline that restored balance. The public had already chosen its symbol, but inside the palace one final verdict remained, and it would determine whether Sophie's words became an act of destruction or the beginning of repair. The final meeting began without ceremony. No folders were placed on the table, and no aides waited outside with prepared statements. Sophie faced Camilla across a room filled with people they both loved and had both wounded. Charles opened the conversation with a truth no one expected him to say aloud. The monarchy had confused protecting feelings with protecting the institution. That confusion had ended. What followed did not erase the pain, but it gave the family a final direction. Charles had brought Camilla, Sophie, Edward, Anne, William, and Catherine together at Windsor to establish a permanent understanding. The king confirmed that his wife would continue supporting him as queen consort, the spouse of the reigning sovereign, but she would not control the duties, schedules, or symbolic standing of other working royals. That distinction mattered because support beside the crown could never become authority over the entire family. Sophie addressed Camilla directly. The Duchess admitted that her original wording had sounded like a rejection of the other woman's entire place within the family. She should not have allowed anger to turn a warning into a personal sentence, yet the trusted confidant refused to withdraw the principle behind what she had said. No individual could represent everyone by pushing their service aside. Camilla finally acknowledged the fear beneath her actions. She had shaped the memorial schedule because she believed greater visibility would silence doubts about her acceptance. Instead, forcing herself into the center had deepened the mistrust she wanted to escape. The queen consort understood that recognition obtained through pressure would never feel secure. Charles accepted his share of the failure. His silence, the monarch admitted, had allowed private insecurity to become institutional pressure. He apologized to Sophie, Catherine, and Anne for failing to intervene before their roles were altered. Edward remained beside his wife, while William listened as his father finally named the imbalance without excuse. The family then agreed that future major representation decisions would be reviewed collectively by the sovereign, the direct heir, and the senior working royals affected. Camilla placed the disputed engagement schedule before Sophie and asked her to destroy it. The Duchess tore it once, cleanly, then passed the pieces to Charles. Camilla remained beside the king, but her attempt to become the monarchy's unquestioned female center ended permanently. Sophie's position was not reduced. Her reputation for principled loyalty became stronger. The room emptied without celebration, yet the monarchy emerged with one truth settled forever. Camilla could stand beside the crown, but she would never be permitted to stand in place of the whole royal family. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.